Now, I do want to talk about the Christian and even Catholic images in this movie because it was very interesting to see, and it made me ask a lot of questions like, is there somebody Catholic working on the post-production of this film? Hi, I'm Mateo Rivera, the Cinematic Catholic, and today I'm going to be reviewing A Quiet Place Day 1, the new prequel in this post-apocalyptic franchise that gives us a deeper look at how the world went quiet. And this is a spoiler-free review, although at the end of this video, I will be saying if the cat lives or dies, in case that is a deciding factor on if you see this movie. And before I get into the review, let me just say I love the Quiet Place franchise. The first movie is such a beautiful story with a lot of Christian imagery and symbols all throughout. I do recommend it to all of my Catholic friends that are a little bit iffy about horror movies. I always say you at least have to watch A Quiet Place. It is so good and so Christian, and just trust me, you will love it. And the second movie echoes a lot of those same sentiments from the first film, and so going into Day 1, I was a little bit skeptical because this is the first movie in the franchise not written and directed by John Krasinski, though he did receive an executive producer and a story credit. But I wasn't sure how this movie was going to approach those same values, if it was going to go in a different direction, and let me just say, I was very happy walking out of this movie. I'm going to get into the spiritual imagery and symbolism later on in this video, but first I want to talk about the movie itself because there is a lot to love about Day 1. First off, Lupita Nyong'o has really climbed the ranks in the last couple of years as one of my favorite actresses working in Hollywood today. She is so masterful at conveying emotions with her face, both huge terrified expressions as well as all the little nuances. She absolutely kills it in this movie, and especially for a film where there is not a lot of dialogue, I really do not see any better casting than her. Joseph Quinn also gives a very strong performance in this movie, although I was a little surprised at how late he comes into the movie. I actually forgot he was going to be in this because I was so invested in Lupita's character, and then when he popped up, I was like, oh, right, it's this guy. Now, I will say, I feel like this movie had a lot more jump scares than the previous two. And look, I mean, Quiet Place has always had jump scares, right? It's basically built into the formula. But I feel like this movie had a lot more of the like, and we're panning in on a window, and then something else that I noticed was that we have never seen death and destruction on this scale in this franchise before. The first film took place on a farm, and we saw a small community in the second movie and got to see what Day 1 looked like for the Abbotts in their town. But with this movie taking place in New York, the amount of bodies getting snatched up by these creatures is much greater. And seeing the aftermath of their arrival did hit a little bit harder. They do a really good job of conveying how quickly and how many people died in this alien invasion. Still, this is a PG-13 movie, so a lot of the deaths are bloodless, but you can get away with a lot in a PG-13 film, you know, blood on the cars, people crushed under rubble and things like that. Now, I am a big fan of horror movies, so a lot of times that stuff won't quite affect me as much, but like I said, for my Catholic friends that are not as desensitized as I am, I could see something like that kind of weighing on their hearts a little bit heavier. Now, as far as the plot of the movie, it did feel a little bit simpler than the previous two, but that's also not necessarily a bad thing. But for my gamers out there, yeah, this definitely felt like a DLC, like if you know what I mean. Like this felt like a bonus extension of the previous films rather than its kind of own standalone thing. My wife and I were talking about it on the way home, and we both agreed that this felt more like a TV episode and less of like a feature film, which with a runtime of 139 minutes, that makes this the longest Quiet Place movie that there is. So it's very ironic that this felt the lightest in terms of story and plot. Still, I appreciated the fact that they didn't overcomplicate it. We got a little bit more lore of the creatures, but they still left a lot of that stuff in mystery, which I love because I feel like once you know too much about a monster, it's no longer scary. But yeah, the plot of this movie is just the characters need to get to a place, and that's it. This movie is the journey to that place. It felt a lot like Cloverfield, if you know what I mean. And I mean, hey, I love Cloverfield, so yeah, I mean, put more of that on my plate, right? Now, I do want to talk about the Christian and even Catholic images in this movie because it was very interesting to see, and it made me ask a lot of questions like, is there somebody Catholic working on the post-production of this film? Let me explain. So pretty early on in the movie, Lupita Nyong'o's character Sam goes to a theater show. And in the background, you hear two random people just having a conversation. And one of them says, that's supposed to be a reference to the Virgin Mary. Now, if you don't know how movies are made, a lot of times that background sound and dialogue is not recorded on the day of. They actually do that in post-production, and because of that, it's very intentional. The lines you hear, the sounds of the cars, the streets, all that stuff is hand-picked out, which means that whoever edited that scene intentionally put that in there. But that's the only line of dialogue that we hear. We don't get to hear the beginning or the rest of their conversation. It's just that one line. And I don't know what it means. I don't know why they added it, but it definitely made me go, And then later on in the film, the characters are seeking refuge. And there are a lot of locations in this movie because the whole film is just them going from one place to the next, to the next, to the next, right? Eventually, the characters find themselves in a church, and it looks to be a Catholic one. Now, what they find in the church, and the camera stays on this for a bit, is you see people praying. Then our characters seek rest and refuge in this church, and you hear the dialogue of a Latin prayer. And usually when you tell me there's going to be a church in a horror movie, I'm thinking like an exorcism, right? Or the monsters are going to burst in the stained glass windows and be climbing all over the cathedral walls, right? But no, the monsters and the evil are kept out of the cathedral, and the characters are able to rest and regain their strength before continuing on with their journey. And the church is a little roughed up a bit, but the crucifix and the tabernacle are left untouched and undamaged. And again, everything in movies is intentional, right? So they have to build the set. They have to dress the set, which means putting what is damaged and what is not damaged in the exact place they want it to be. They have to record a prayer in Latin, or at least find a sample recording of it and intentionally put that in. And so I appreciate this franchise for always having a positive look at religion and Christianity, especially in the face of all these monsters and this evil that has spread across the world in this universe. I know that John Krasinski has said in interviews that he was raised Catholic and was Catholic even until his adult life. I'm not sure what his beliefs are now, but I know that he was an executive producer on this film. So did he put that in? Was that his choice? I'm not sure, but we love to see it. Please keep on putting more of this in secular movies. It's good stuff. And then, of course, something that is also baked into the formula of these movies is the emphasis on the value of life. How far you are willing to go to save one person, how much you value life once you see how fragile it actually is. And they absolutely uphold that in this movie as well. Although I did have mixed feelings about one character's end, but of course this is a spoiler-free review. But if you've seen the movie, you probably know what I'm talking about. Maybe we can talk about it down in the comments. But all in all, this movie is definitely on par with the previous two films, making this a very solid horror trilogy. And I'm totally on board, man. Keep giving me more Quiet Place movies. I will definitely come to see them. Oh, and in case you're wondering about the cat, I'm going to put spoiler here on the screen. And if you don't want to know, you can mute it until this text goes away. 3, 2, 1. The cat does not die. Okay, and spoiler talk is gone, and now you know, and you can decide if you want to go see this movie or not. And so for my cinephile score, I'm giving this an 8.5 out of 10. Great scares, great thrills. My wife and I had a really fun time with this movie, and it makes for a great date night. And for my Catholic score, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. I would definitely recommend this to any of my Catholic friends that either like horror movies or would want to kind of dip their toes in that genre. My love of horror makes me an outlier in a lot of the Catholic circles that I run in, and so whenever there's a chance to bridge that gap, I'm just like, yes, come closer, it'll be okay. But guys, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed my review of A Quiet Place Day 1. Once again, my name is Mateo Rivera, and until next time, hasta la vista.